Welcome. My name is Michael Kurtzmeyer, and this is my presentation on website defacements, finding hacktivism in Web Archive. I'm a PhD candidate at Maynooth University in Ireland between Media Studies and Digital Humanities. And in this presentation, I want to give an overview into what web defacements are and what their value for research is or could be. I want to show where these defacements can be found and how existing collections relate to larger web archives. Finally, of course, I want to give an outlook into a project that I'm currently working on, and I also want to give you some samples of what web defacements actually look like. To start off with a very brief introduction, the way I see web defacements is as a subset of online activism. Web defacement is where an attacker replaces a website with their own version, and attacker and replace already suggests that some kind of illicit access to the original page has taken place. This is where hacking comes in. Mostly this is where somebody hacks a server and then overwrites existing websites with new websites. The web defacements that I'm looking at have as a connecting point the promotion of a political cause or ideology, meaning that people hack for the promotion of a certain message. It's important to see that web defacements are somehow sandwiched in between more conventional ways of online protesting, such as petitions and hashtags, and that web defacements in themselves do not aim to destroy IT infrastructure, right? So they would be less transgressive than anything connected to cyber warfare or disabling infrastructure. But off to an example, the website you see on the left is the labour.org.uk website as it appeared in November 1996. And just a month later, the website looks quite different. In December 1996, we are looking at a hacked version of this website where somebody has taken the time and effort to mirror the original structure and mirror the original picture here and replace all the links with their own links. So basically overwrote the entire content of this page with new content. This is done in a quite elaborate way where the hacked site somewhat mirrors the look and feel of the original site. And this, of course, also leads into the potential value of web defacements for research such as web history, generally looking maybe at political parties, online presence of the time, or also looking at general sentiment towards labor in '96, or online activism in a time where little was known about online activism at all. Now, the subtitles already say that, and if you're familiar with the Internet Archive, then you recognize the header here on the left-hand side. So the original page from November 1996 is easily available through the Internet Archive, and it's no problem at all to find and retrieve that page, and it's absolutely stable, and you can cite that, or you can download it, and you can do with it whatever you like. Whereas the page on the right is only preserved through a private defacement archive, and we are far away from this being a stable resource. We are far away from this being easily obtainable. Yet I think if those two were to be combined, then it could add a lot of value to the understanding of the history of that website. So if you had the option to see that sometime between November and December, this hack occurred, and this is what the site looked like, if only for a few days. This takes us to the collection status of web defacements. This is a list of collections that I'm aware of, and there's just two that I briefly want to touch upon. The largest one at the top there is Zone H, and it's the only archive that is still accepting submissions. It has very poor accessibility. We're talking about upwards of 3 million defaced pages with effectively no search function and no useful metadata. So really, a mirror is probably a good word. Archive is not, right? This is just, it's a giant collection of files. Then we have 3 more in the gray zone that are still somewhat online, but they have long stopped accepting new material. And we have a large section of pages that are gone forever. They just went offline without any explanation, and we don't know what happened to this content. If sometimes content is mirrored between those archives, if another archive holds that content, or if we should just see it as gone. The attrition mirrored, the second one here with this red marking, is the one that I want to talk about a little bit more. That's the one that held the labor example, and they have defacements generally up to 2001, and they're quite open to research access. And of course, that made them an ideal target for my project, which was to take this attrition archive and turn it into something that could really be used in web research on the web. So to take this, what is called an archive, and turn it into something that we as people dealing with archiving the internet would really want to call an archive and feel good about it. So as I said, the term archive is used very loosely here, and the same applies to attrition, where you have 153,000 files and no metadata. And it's worse than that. Not only do you not have any metadata, but you also have nothing even close to collection criteria. You have nothing even close to a workflow. So I don't know if they went out and looked for pages, or if people reported pages to them. I don't know what made them accept or reject any given page. All I have is those files. At least the files are structured. So you have a folder for year, a folder for month, folder for day, and then a folder for the actual URL. And sure, a nice bunch of files, but what's actually in there? So the first thing I did, just to get an overview, is to extract the year and month, and then simply count the material over time. And that shows you that we're looking at material from 1995 to 2003. So quite old already in terms of internet history, with a focus on material from 1999 to 2001. So the labor example would be one of the older pages in the collection here. And then I ran a natural language processing entity count on it. Just really, that's all work in progress, to get a quick overview of what topics might appear in there. And we see geopolitical events such as Kashmir, India, Pakistan. And this, of course, all hinting to the Kashmir conflict. Generally, from my experience, those web defacements tend to follow geopolitical events quite closely. Yet there is also a number of fruit here: strawberry, peach, blackberry, raspberry, non-alcoholic. That doesn't make sense to me right away. And that I left that in there to show that when you're doing research like this, when you're trying to unlock this kind of strange material, that at the same time of every step, you also have to question your tools and methods, maybe even more so than when you're using a proven approach. Okay, but we can not only count entities, I've also made this interactive link map of the entire network that shows you what links exist and if there are any intersections between pages. And just to give you maybe a brief example here, this would be one of the defaced URLs. Zoom in a bit more. And every link that this page has would feature as another node on here. I think this is a very nice and intuitive way of approaching the data set and getting a general understanding of what is in there. We also begin to see clustering here. And what is interesting is that where we see connections, it's interesting to see what connects different pages. And safemode.org, that's another website that deals with hacking. It's interesting that we see two that would link to this. And occasionally you see email addresses left behind by hackers that could then help to attribute different attacks to one person. And of course, it is also just generally interesting to see what's in there. What size do clusters have? What clusters do we see at all? And just as a little disclaimer, this is currently running on just 30% of the data set, and that's just so that it has a somewhat better performance and I can actually move around in it, and it's a bit more fluent. But yeah, this could be a nice way to make this data set, which is not only large, but also a bit obscure, more accessible. And yeah, of course, give you a nice visualization with that. So my goal is still to continue working on this and turn that into a resource that is fully stable and citable, possibly release this and the tools that you have seen in a way that would allow people to quite easily engage with the content in this archive. Ideally, get a publication out while I'm doing this. And that's the general outlook, right? So do those defacements have any value in teaching and research? Yes, I believe so. I believe they can complement existing web archives. I believe that even the data derived from there, such as the entities or such as the connecting points between different clusters, they could provide very interesting material to then go back to traditional web archives and look for that and see if we find any traces of these defacements even in traditional and existing web archives. So yes, if the groundwork is done, those defacements can complement existing web archives and provide novel insight. They can help complement histories, they can fill in gaps, and they also provide what I think is very valuable insight into social movements on the web at the time. And they also provide rich history for understanding the history of a certain specific website. But of course, a lot of groundwork needs to be done, right? I said that many of these pages use the term archive very loosely, and I try to produce something that really deserves the name of an archive, and at the same time, of course, also have tools and visualizations that do justice to this somewhat strange data set. So in the meantime, I'm going to continue working on this attrition data set that you've just seen. That's because it's easily the most accessible and they are the most open to research access. And of course, I am also going to search for any lost mirrors, all the ones that we saw earlier in this list that are blacked out, that are gone, just like old manuscripts. Continue asking around if anyone has a copy of these. Okay, with that, we have reached the end, and I just want to thank you all very much for your time and the opportunity to present here. I'm of course available for any questions and comments, and I've put my contact details here again. And yes, with that, I'm going to end my talk. Thank you all very much.